The trauma bay doors burst open at 2:47 a.m., and every monitor in the unit seemed to scream at once. Petty Officer First Class Daniel Reyes came in on a gurney soaked through with blood, his uniform in shreds, his face a mask of dirt and fury. 3 medics had fought to keep him alive for the 11 minutes it took to reach Bethesda Naval Medical Center, and now it was up to the night shift to finish the job. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, head of trauma surgery, moved fast, barking orders, his team falling into practiced rhythm around him. This was supposed to be routine chaos, the kind the hospital handled every week. But when the first nurse reached for Reyes's arm to start a line, he screamed a single word that stopped the entire room cold. "Emily!" Nobody moved. The nurse, a capable young woman named Priya Chandran, hesitated with the forecatheter still in her gloved hand. "Sir, I need to get this line in, you're losing. Get me Emily Dawson." His voice cracked, but the command underneath it was iron. "Nobody else touches me. Get her. Now." Dr. Whitfield stepped forward, irritation flashing across his face. He had seen delirium before, patients hallucinating names of wives, mothers, dead friends. "Son, you're in shock, you don't know what you're." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Reyes grabbed Whitfield's wrist with a grip that made the surgeon wince. His eyes, though glassy with blood loss, were terrifyingly lucid. "Emily Dawson. Nurse. Night shift. If she's on this base, I want her in this room in the next 90 seconds, or I am pulling every line out of my own arm, and you can explain that to Bethesda's board." The room froze again, this time from something closer to fear. A patient threatening to sabotage his own care wasn't unusual, but the certainty in his voice was. He wasn't confused. He was giving an order, and everyone in that trauma bay could feel, on some animal level, that he had given orders like it before, to people who obeyed without question. Down the hallway, Emily Dawson was walking back from a supply run, her badge swinging against blue scrubs, her ponytail slightly loose after 6 straight hours on her feet. She was unremarkable in every visible way, quiet, efficient, the kind of nurse who did her job well and never sought credit for it. Colleagues respected her but knew almost nothing about her outside these walls. She kept to herself. She ate lunch alone. She had been at Bethesda for 2 years and nobody could recall her ever raising her voice. A runner intercepted her before she reached the doors. "Emily, Trauma Bay 4, right now. Patients refusing all care, he's asking for you by name." Emily's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, a subtle recalibration, like a soldier hearing a familiar alarm. "What's his name?" "Reyes. Daniel Reyes. Navy." For half a second, she went completely still. Then she was moving, faster than anyone had ever seen her move, pushing through the sliding glass doors of the trauma wing with a kind of purpose that made Dr. Whitfield's junior resident stop mid-sentence to watch her pass. The automatic doors slid open ahead of her, revealing the harsh white light of the corridor beyond, and for one frozen moment, everyone waiting outside Trauma Bay saw her framed there, calm, focused, and utterly transformed from the nurse they thought they knew. Inside, Reyes heard her badge clip jingling before he saw her, and his whole body sagged with something like relief. "There she is," he whispered, and for the first time since he'd been wheeled in, his shoulders lowered a fraction. "Command Sergeant. Took you long enough." The room didn't understand the word yet, but they would. Whitfield turned toward the doors, ready to intercept whoever this mystery nurse was and demand an explanation for the disruption she was apparently about to cause. He had run this trauma unit for 11 years. He did not appreciate patients dictating their own care team, and he certainly didn't appreciate a nurse's name carrying more weight in his own operating theater than his medical degree. He straightened his coat, preparing the kind of firm, authoritative correction that had ended 100 smaller disputes before. But as Emily approached, snapping on gloves without breaking stride, something about the way she assessed the room, reading vitals off the monitors in a single sweep, clocking the surgical tray, clocking Reyes's pupils, made the words die in his throat. She hadn't even reached the bed yet, and she was already running triage in her head like she'd done it 1,000 times before, somewhere far from any hospital. BP's crashing, she said flatly, not to Whitfield, not to anyone in particular, just stating fact. He's got maybe 4 minutes before we lose the airway. Someone get me the trauma kit, and somebody explain why he's still on a peripheral line instead of central access. Whitfield opened his mouth to object to being spoken over in his own trauma bay, and that was when Reyes, blood loss and all, found the strength to laugh, a short, pained, disbelieving sound. "Doc," he rasped, "you have no idea who just walked into your hospital." Every nurse and resident in that room turned to look at Emily Dawson, the quiet woman who ate lunch alone, as she rolled up her sleeves and reached for the trauma kit like she'd been born doing this. Whatever she was about to reveal, it was clear now that the last 2 years at Bethesda had only been half her story. Emily's hands moved with terrifying precision, cutting away Reyes's ruined uniform sleeve, checking pulse points, calling out numbers that made the resident scramble to keep pace. Whitfield stood at the foot of the bed, torn between professional outrage and the undeniable fact that whatever this nurse was doing, she was doing it better and faster than his own trained staff. "Central line, right subclavian, now," she said, and a resident obeyed before glancing at Whitfield for permission he hadn't given. The room had already decided who was in charge, and it wasn't the man with the surgeon's badge. Whitfield finally managed, forcing authority into his voice. "I don't know what relationship you have with this patient, but I run this trauma bay, and I need you to." "Sir." Emily didn't look up from Reyes's arm as she spoke, her voice calm but carrying an edge that silenced him instantly. 6 years ago, this man was point man on an extraction team I commanded in a compound outside Kandahar. He took 2 rounds pulling one of my medics out of a collapsed structure. I stitched him up in a dirt basement with a headlamp and half a med kit because that was all we had. So respectfully, Doctor, right now I need you to hand me that clamp, and we can discuss chain of command after his stable." The words landed like a detonation. Priya Chandran's mouth fell open. The junior residents exchanged glances. Whitfield, for the first time in a decade, simply handed over the clamp. Reyes, fading in and out, managed a weak grin. "Command Sergeant Major Emily Dawson," he mumbled to no one and everyone, "Special Operations Command, 3 combat tours, the only reason half my old unit is still breathing. And she's been serving you people coffee and taking blood pressure for 2 years." The revelation rippled through the hospital before Reyes was even out of surgery. Nurses who had worked beside Emily for months found themselves recalculating everything they thought they knew, the calm in emergencies that never seemed to touch her, the way she moved through chaos like it was second nature, the quiet distance she'd always kept. It hadn't been coldness. It had been a woman folding an entire war into the shape of an ordinary life, choosing silence over recognition, service over spotlight. Word reached the hospital administrator by morning, and by noon, a black SUV had pulled into the staff lot, flanked by 2 more. A 3-star admiral stepped out, flanked by aides, and walked directly into the hospital asking for Emily Dawson by her full military title. Whitfield, still shaken from the night before, watched from his office window as the admiral saluted her in the middle of the hallway, a full, formal salute, the kind reserved for genuine heroes, not hospital staff. Nurses stopped in their tracks. Patients in wheelchairs turned to stare. The image would end up circulating through every department by the end of the day, their quiet, unassuming colleague, standing at attention while a 3-star admiral thanked her personally for actions that, as it turned out, had saved 11 American lives and had earned her a silver star she had never once mentioned. The admiral's voice carried down the corridor as he spoke, loud enough for the gathered staff to hear every word. Sergeant Major Dawson pulled 4 wounded soldiers out of a burning structure under direct fire, then held a defensive position for 40 minutes until air support arrived. Petty Officer Reyes is alive today because of her. So are the 3 men standing behind me. He gestured, and only then did the hospital staff notice the men who'd arrived with him, 2 of them recognizable now as patients who'd passed through Bethesda's doors in the past year, quietly, without fanfare, men Emily had personally checked on during her rounds without ever explaining why. Dr. Whitfield found her afterward in the break room, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, looking smaller and more tired than she had all night. He didn't know how to begin the apology he owed her, so he simply said, "You could have told me." Emily looked up, and for the first time since he'd known her, he saw the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying more than anyone around her understood. "Doctor, if I walked in here every day announcing what I used to do, I'd never get to just be a nurse. I didn't want the medals. I wanted the quiet." She paused, turning the coffee cup slowly. "Last night wasn't about proving anything. It was about a man I promised I'd never leave behind twice." Reyes recovered fully over the following weeks, and on the day he was discharged, the entire trauma unit lined the hallway to see him off, not for him alone, but for the woman walking beside his wheelchair, the one who had quietly saved lives for years without a single person clapping for her. As he stood at the doors, leaning on a cane, he turned back one last time and said the words that would echo through Bethesda long after he'd gone: "Every soldier should be lucky enough to have an Emily Dawson show up when it matters most." If this story moved you, if you believe the quietest people in the room are sometimes carrying the heaviest history, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because The Hidden Nurse brings you a new story like this every single week, honoring the heroes hiding in plain sight all around us.